This video is sponsored by War Thunder. Cities 2 is broken. The Grim Reaper has stretched across as far as the eye can see. I'm hemorrhaging population and money like there's no tomorrow. This city, for example, used to be profitable, and now, as you can see, it's anything but. And don't even get me started on the traffic problems. This, my friends, is Cities Skylines 2.0. The new patch just dropped. There are a lot of big changes, as well as some pretty significant warnings to be aware of. Let's jump straight in. Firstly, there are 3 things that will change, and these will almost certainly mess with your city, hopefully temporarily. First up, government subsidies will be removed. So, if you were reliant on that free money no longer. And service upkeep costs are also increased. What does that mean? Well, secondly, if you're reliant on external services, like your power, for example, you need to enable import city services in order to continue to import them, and it'll cost you now. So there's an extra cost. Finally, and the third warning that could break your economy, there is now an upkeep cost for tiles. Individual tiles that you've bought have an upkeep cost. You may have unlocked tiles already, paid a one-off cost. That's all fine and good. But from now on moving forward, all of the tiles, except for the starting ones, will have a cost. Moreover, if you start a new map, you will be able to enable the option unlock all tiles. The tiles won't have a cost, you won't have to pay the 22 million a month, and achievements will be disabled. So those are the 3 game-breaking warnings. Government subsidies, city services, and an upkeep cost to tiles. There are also a few more warnings, kind of flow-on effects from what might happen, as well as, of course, the bulk of the patch note changes. Let's cover the 2 key warnings and then move into the changes. Firstly, you should expect a death wave in your city lasting 1 to 2 game months. That's because they've changed the calculation for the way that the game works out when the Grim Reaper should visit. It now won't happen all at the same time, the same age, but instead more randomly. And secondly, the budget calculations will probably trend negatively. Before we move on to the changes, a very quick word from our gracious video sponsor, War Thunder. Available for PC and consoles, in War Thunder you take command and control of over 2,500 vehicles across land, sea, and the skies in epic PvP battles. In the most comprehensive vehicle combat game ever made, the array of craft stretches from the cars and biplanes of over a century ago to modern vehicles. I personally recommend you dive into where War Thunder's vehicle depth goes to the next level, rendering each of its vehicles down to the individual detailed components, each one vulnerable to damage or disabling fire. The detailed vehicles and realistic armor is surrounded by authentic graphics and sound, placing us inside an immersive world, and one with over 70 million players worldwide. So join us now and play War Thunder for free on PC, PlayStation, or Xbox, and sign up using my link in the pinned comment or video description to get in on the fun. And even better news if you do, for a limited time, new or returning players, those who haven't played for at least 6 months, receive this massive bonus pack, including loads of good stuff like multiple premium vehicles, an exclusive vehicle decorator, the Eagle of Valor, 100,000 Silver Lions, and 7 days of premium account features. Thank you, War Thunder, for sponsoring this section of the video. Now, let's return to Cities Skylines 2. And here we'll focus on the full patch notes, but firstly, a couple of other quick warnings. Companies will take time to adjust to the new production and employment numbers, and this may very well lead to an increase in unemployment. Likewise, demand adjustments will happen quickly, so expect those demand bars down the bottom left, residential bars, so on and so forth, to fluctuate around quite a bit as citizens relocate potentially to the type of housing that they may require after the patch. Speaking of housing, high rent notifications should decrease over time, and if you're still finding them, it may indicate you have some unemployment issues, so make sure there are jobs available. Now on to the actual notes, and the first one, we actually discussed this I think just last week. The building upgrade rework. You can now have more control over buildings from the info panel. For example, upgrade types can be removed from the panel, and sub-buildings can be removed using the bulldozer, relocated, turned on and off, and selected individually. Very nice, and it goes alongside some upgrades that can now be placed freely within the radius limit of the building instead of being sort of awkwardly crammed up beside it. And there's a city service tutorial for those tutorial fiends out there too. Now on to the economy updates, the game-changing heralded updates, the first 3 of which we've already covered in the warnings. Government subsidies have been removed, taxes and services tab has been updated by the way, it'll now unlock at milestone 1, and the production tab unlocks at 2. And those imported city services that you'll now need to toggle on, again, we've already discussed. You can do so in the budget panel. Outside connections won't send service vehicles if it's turned off, and there'll be expenses for ambulance, hearse, fire engine, garbage, and police. Scaling, by the way, by your population, so it will increase naturally as the size of your city increases. Speaking of an increasing city, city services also received a suite of changes. Most of them aimed at either increasing efficiency or making the game more difficult. They've increased the chance of people entering and graduating both elementary and high schools, and adults can apply for a second chance as well. Garbage accumulation now accounts for students, employees, prisoners, occupants, and homeless people in this calculation, and they've also balanced garbage city service upgrades. And we will be delving into the weeds just a little bit deeper because most of these changes are a little bit more nuanced, as you can see on your screen. Adjusting the accumulation values for garbage. The upkeep costs of most city service buildings, in fact, have been adjusted. Likewise, wages for city service employees are paid from the players' money now, and they've increased the price of electricity importing. They've also increased the time it takes for an ambulance and hearse notifications to appear. Some of these changes are quite big, some of them relatively small, but again, like I say, they're all around either making the game more difficult or making it somehow more efficient. Like, for example, adjusting the service fee curves for efficiency and consumption, as well as adjusting water service fees and increasing the amount of workers for a whole load of different places, from medical clinics through to landfills. And the changes don't end there. If we peer under the hood of the demand changes, we see that residential density now depends on household wealth and family size, and a load of other, in my opinion, very logical changes to the demand calculations. For example, household spawns are based on average happiness, homelessness, tax, available student positions, and jobs. Commercial companies spawn based on needs of households, reducing how often the same companies will appear again and again in your city. Maybe the eternal run of petrol stations, of gas stations, is finally over. Commercial and industrial demand has also been adjusted to avoid the not enough customers complaints, and taxes have been, they have more of an overall effect on demand now. There are also some short, sharp, and in my opinion quite effective changes to employment. Workers from outside of your city no longer pay tax. They are no longer included in population or workplace overviews, info views, and they'll look for new jobs more frequently. Moreover, workplaces in outside connections are now less desirable than workplaces within your city. Makes sense for your citizens. Also, citizens now, only citizens, in fact, who don't have health problems, such as sick or injured people, count as valid employable citizens. No one more. They can only receive unemployment for a limited amount of time, and if they run out, they'll complain about high rent and eventually move away. Households and happiness also receive some very logical changes. Households without adults will move away, and rich households will prefer larger homes in attractive neighborhoods, and the opposite is also true. Household needs are calculated logically based on their spendable money, what's left after they pay rent. So now they spend money more reasonably. And they've also reduced the number of senior citizens moving into the city, so that pension burden perhaps not as pesky. Finally, rounding out the household and happiness changes, low happiness affects the chance that a household will move out. Households consider the garbage fee when calculating their cash, and finally, they've added a curve parameter to the death rate to smooth the death of those pesky senior citizens. Existing cities will experience that forewarned wave of the Grim Reaper that we talked about earlier. Production and company changes see perhaps a little bit less of a grim tiding. It is, however, a little bit more in the weeds. They've adjusted values for resource production, price, household wages, and tax income. And they've also changed a whole load of other things, as well as resource price itself, the very calculation, which now has two parts, a lower part for industrial processing, and another one for commercial companies' service prices. They've changed and adjusted everything from the workforce needed per unit for resource processing to a pre-configured amount. Instead of it being just automatically calculated at the start of the game, companies will go bankrupt instead of looking for new locations. They've changed industrial manufacturing space multiplier, adjusted office employee amount, the amount of work required per product to decrease city income, and the simulated service prices. The changes here that you've seen on your screen are largely targeted to make it both slightly more realistic and, again, an underlying theme a little bit more difficult. Decreased income, a slightly slower grind per unit, and hopefully one that doesn't lead to a lot of replication in cities. Speaking of replication, you'll see no replication of any landlords. As we discussed last week, Cities Skylines 2 has removed the virtual landlord, so building upkeep is now paid equally by all renters. Speaking of more rent and building level changes, most of them are fairly brief, though a little bit complex. They've changed the calculation across the board, tweaked the high rent notifications to be based on the household's income. Even if they currently don't have enough money in their balance, they won't complain and will instead spend less money on resources. And finally, building level is based on whether renters can actually pay the fee. When they pay it in full, the condition of the building increases by a constant amount. And if they can't pay, the building condition decreases by that very same amount. Crime was also adjusted. Fairly brief here. They've fixed police service coverage actually for assets. The police station will patrol regularly to decrease crime, and all zone types within will increase the crime rate depending on the police's coverage. Nice to see it sort of responding to that a little bit. And as well as fixing some discrepancies between different police vehicles, they've removed crime scene pathfinding limitations of a building's crime rate to avoid all criminals having the same pathfinding result. To queue up to do a crime makes them very predictable, as well as adding a new crime factor to lower crime probability in cities with big pops and lower crime reoccurrence probability due to criminals needing to wait a long time to remove that pesky criminal tag. Finally, there were a suite of miscellaneous changes, including some of those ones that we've already discussed about maps. The first few tiles won't have a fee, the rest of them have upkeep fees, and the cost of purchasing them actually will also go up. They've also increased, speaking of costs going up, the construction costs and upkeep costs for roads, as well as moving the upkeep breakdown from the tooltip to the info panel. They've reduced the amount of money the player gets back from bulldozing stuff, and they've halved the amount of money that a household will spend when they go and shop. Finally, they've adjusted specialized industry unlocking to start from milestone 0, thank goodness for that. There were also a massive suite of fixes, like just huge. Most of them obscure. I'll have the full patch notes, of course, linked below if you'd like to delve in through all of them. Some of the headline ones included taxes being collected after bulldozing an entire city, citizen wealth overview not displaying things properly, a newly spawned company complaining about having no workers, and commercial zones incurring massive amounts of debt for the citizens. The rest of the issues, like I say, may be a little more obscure, but there might just be the one in there for you. Outside of fixes, there were two more parts of the patch before we round out this video. Firstly, modding. Again, I won't probably go through all the details here. Loads of fixes. They've added support as well for custom units for sliders in the mod settings used in it, as well as support for key bindings for mods. They've updated the mod publisher and updated Paradox mods with several improvements. And speaking of improvements, it wouldn't be a patch to Cities Skylines 2 without some performance improvements. The UI performance optimizations for the economy panel are now in place, as well as other UI performance optimizations with audio bindings, rendering cursors, and updating panels. And across the board, hopefully we'll see some improvements from the chirper panel to particle effects, audio, memory usage, and placement to improve FPS when placing complex buildings. They've also fixed job finding performance issues. And that, my friends, rounds out today's massive patch update. A huge update to the economy of Cities Skylines 2. Potentially very game changing. We've been waiting for a lot of this realism, slightly more hardcore stuff for a long time. And as you've witnessed, it's also very game-breaking, all going well, just in the short term. Should only be a couple of months of your city running. I noticed a lot of extra traffic being generated. A lot of traffic jams, which I'm assuming are because every single person over the age of about 60 in the city decided to cark it. I don't know. Let me know what you think. And before you go, my humble thanks again to War Thunder for sponsoring this video. Don't forget to play for free on PC and consoles using my link in the pinned comment or video description. For a limited time, new and returning players who haven't played in 6 months will also get that massive bonus pack with premium vehicles and loads of other good stuff. Thank you for watching. I'll see you next time.